Hello and welcome to another day of English 2. I'm your online instructor, Miss Bauer. As you might remember, we have been looking at Notice and Note, close reading strategies from Kylene Beers and Bob Probst. Today, we're going to be looking at another signpost, and this is our last signpost, and it's called Memory Moment. But before we look at Memory Moment, let's review some of the other signposts that we've been learning about. First, we looked at contrasts and contradictions. When you're reading and a character says or does something that is opposite or contradicts what he has been saying and doing all along, you should stop and ask yourself, why is the character doing that? The answer could help you make a prediction or an inference about the plot and the conflict. The next one we looked at was the aha moment. When you're reading and suddenly a character realizes, understands, or finally figures something out, you should stop and ask yourself, how might this change things? If the character figured out a problem, you probably just learned something about the conflict. If the character understood a life lesson, you probably just learned about the theme. The next one we looked at was tough questions. When you're reading and the character asks himself a really difficult question, you should stop and ask yourself, what does this question make me wonder about? The answer will tell you about the conflict and may give you ideas about what will happen later in the story. The next signpost we looked at was words from the wiser. When you're reading and a character who's probably older and lots wiser takes the main character aside and gives serious advice, you should stop and ask yourself, what's the life lesson and how might it affect the character? Whatever that lesson is, you've probably found a theme for the story. Yesterday we looked at the signpost again and again. When you're reading and you notice a word, phrase, object, or situation mentioned over and over, you should stop and ask yourself, why does this keep showing up again and again? The answer will tell you about the theme and the conflict, or it might foreshadow what will happen later. Today, we're going to look at memory moments. So when you're Today, we're going to look at the Notice and Note signpost that will help you understand why characters do what they do. And this one is called the memory moment. So the memory moment is a point in the story where the narrator will take a break and break that story to tell you a memory of a particular character. So when you're reading and the author interrupts the action to tell you a memory, you should stop and ask yourself, why might this memory be important? The answer will tell you about the theme or the conflict, or it might foreshadow what will happen later in the story. Sometimes the clue to the memory moment is very obvious. They might say, I remember the first time that this happened. Or they might say, in that very moment, a memory came flashing back. Sometimes the memory is a little bit tougher to find, but you will see an interruption in the story and then you will see that flashback. So when you see that flashback, again, you should stop and ask yourself that anchor question, why might this memory be important? Today, we're going to look at a story by Joan Bauer called Hope Was Here. This is a book about a young lady who lives with her Aunt Addie, and her mother has left her with her aunt. And so we're going to read and we're going to see several moments where Hope is the main character, where Hope has these flashbacks or these memories. And then we're going to, again, stop and ask ourselves why this memory is important or why might it be important. So as I read, I want you to follow along in the story that you have in front of you and notice when those flashbacks happen. And we will come back together and look at that. We walked across the street to the old Buick that was packed to the hilt with everything we owned and a U-Haul trailer chained to the back. It was May the 26th. We were heading to Mahoney, Wisconsin to start work in a diner there that needed a professional manager and cook. That was Addie. Was short on waitresses, that was me, and was giving us an apartment. The man we were going to work for had been diagnosed with leukemia and needed help fast. I don't mean sounded We walked across the street to the old Buick that was packed to the hilt with everything we owned and had a U-Haul trailer chained to the back. It was May the 26th. We were headed to Mahoney, Wisconsin to start work in a diner there that needed a professional manager and cook, Addie, and was short on waitresses, me, and was giving us an apartment. The man we were going to work for had been diagnosed with leukemia and needed help fast. I don't mean to sound ungenerous, but working for a close to dying man didn't sound like a great career move to me. I had to leave school right before the end of my undistinguished sophomore year, too. I hate leaving places I love. We were about to get into the car just as Morty, the cab driver, double parked his yellow taxi. Good old Morty. The first time I waited on him, he unloosened his belt a notch before he even looked at the menu. I knew I had a true believer. I raised my hand to a great tipper. "You always took care of me, kid." He shouted this from across the street as a UPS truck started honking to him to move his cab. "I tried, Morty." "Wherever you go, you'll be okay. You got heart." The UPS driver screamed something heartless at Morty, who screamed back, "Watch your mouth, big man in a brown truck." I didn't know what kind of customers I'd get in Wisconsin. All right, I'm going to stop right here because I've noticed that Joy Bauer interrupts the narrative to have Hope, the main character, tell us about a memory that she had. I know that memories are important to characters just as memories are important to us. Here, as Hope walks across the street to her vehicle and Morty is across the street and hollers at her, she remembers that first encounter that she had with Morty. And so I know that this memory is important, and I almost want to say, I wonder if Hope is just a little apprehensive about what the future holds. And we're going to look at another passage later on in this story where we'll get a little more clarity about what Hope might be feeling. But we want to ask ourselves, again, when we get there, why might this memory be important? And so for this particular memory that we just had, why might that memory with Morty be important? So we're going to look at the next section, and as I'm reading, I want you to mark in your margin an MM for memory moment if you notice the character has a flashback or that memory moment. She grabbed my hand and gave it a squeeze. Addie never promised that life would be easy, but she did promise that if I hung with her, the food would be good. Believe me when I tell you, I know about survival. I was born too early and much too small, 2 pounds and 5 ounces. For the first month of my life, I kept gasping for air, like I couldn't get the hang of breathing. I couldn't eat either, couldn't suck a bottle. The doctors didn't think I would make it. Shows what they know. My mother didn't want to take responsibility of a baby, so she left me with Addie, her older sister, and went off to live her own life. I've seen her exactly 3 times since I was born, when she visited on my 5th, 8th, and 13th birthdays. Each time she talked about being a waitress, what made a good one, great hands and personality, what were the pitfalls, crazed cooks and being on your feet all day. What was the biggest tip she ever got? $300 from a plumber who had just won the instant lottery. Each time she told me, "Hun, leaving you with Addie was the best thing I could have done for you. You need constants in your life." She had a different hair color each time she said it. Addie's been my #1 constant. Because of this, I don't buy into traditional roles. My favorite book when I was little had pictures of baby animals like foxes and lambs and ducklings who were being raised by other animals like ducks, dogs, geese, and wolves. Addie said it was our story. Again, I'm going to stop because as Hope and Addie are heading off to Wisconsin, instead of thinking ahead to their trip, Addie is looking back and she remembers her mother, especially those times on her birthdays. So remember, when we come to such a moment, we should stop and ask ourselves, why might this memory be important? So I want you now to turn and talk to your neighbor and ask that question. Why might this memory be important? We'll come back together in just a minute. All right, so as I was walking around the room, I noticed some really good thinking happening. One said, I wonder if her mom will be able to find them in Wisconsin. Maybe Hope is wondering that too. That's a great thought. Another person said, at first it looks like the memory moment is making me think that she's worried that her aunt might leave her like her mom. Ooh. But then she says that her Aunt Addie is her only constant. So even though they might move a lot, her aunt is always with her as her constant, helping her feel safe wherever they go. So maybe this memory that Joan Bauer is giving the audience is going to foreshadow that Addie is going to be in a good place because she has Addie with her. Or maybe they're setting it up so Addie might have to leave her as well. We're not exactly sure, so we're going to continue reading another spot in this book. So as I read, I want you again to write in your margin MM when the author interrupts the action to tell us a memory. And remember that anchor question, why might this memory be important? When we come back together after reading this section, you're going to write in your margin why that memory might be important. So follow along with me as I read this next section. I stared out the window as the Buick roared west to whatever. Harrison Beckworth McCoy, my best male friend at school, had given me a goodbye present, and I was opening it now as Addie pushed the Buick through Ohio. Inside the box was a small glass prism that caught the sun. A hand-printed note from Harrison read, "New places always help us look at life differently. I will miss you, but won't lose you." Harrison was always saying some sensitive things like that, which put him instantly on Jocelyn Lidstrom's male sensitivity chart. He was the only male either of us knew who had made this chart constantly over 12 months. Donald Respighi, who occasionally said sensitive things like, "Nice sweater," had been on twice. Enter memories, sweet and sour. Harrison and me baking enormous mocha chip cookies for the high school bake sale and having them stolen on the Lexington Avenue subway. Harrison's African fighting fish, Luther, who ate Chef Boyardee ravioli without chewing. Harrison reading my mother's photocopied annual Christmas letter that she sent to family and friends. "Dear friends," she'd crossed out friends and wrote in, "Addie and my little tulip." Harrison commenting that motherhood should be like driving a car. You should have to pass a test before you get to do it legally. I held the prism up to the light. The sun hit it and showered colors through the windshield. "Now isn't that something?" Addie said, smiling at the light. "Yeah." I looked out the window, trying not to cry. All right, so we're going to take a minute because I've seen a couple of memory moments, and I hope you have too. So I want you to take a minute, think, write down what you think what you think might be the importance of that memory. Once you've written your thoughts down, I want you to turn and talk with your neighbor and you guys discuss. I'll come back as I've heard your discussions and we'll look at what you guys are saying. You guys have had some great thoughts. Some of those are like, this memory moment is kind of like the words of the wiser. Her memory made her remember the wise advice that he used to give her. That's pretty good. Sometimes, or most of the time, these anchor signposts will come up in multiple stories. So just because we're focusing on one story for each of the signposts does not mean that there aren't multiple signposts. That's a good one. And so let's look at what else somebody else said. She might be worried that she won't make friends like these when she gets to Wisconsin. Those are some really great thoughts. So memories are easy to spot for the most part. And so as you said, the passage began with one, and then there were others that were weaved in. As you think about why these memories are important, think about the power of that and why the author chose to share those memories with us. So, when we leave today, I want you to think about these memory moments and why they are important. So, remember that anchor question. When you're reading and the author interrupts the action to tell you a memory, you should stop and ask yourself, why might this memory be important? The answers will tell you about the theme, conflict, or might foreshadow what will happen later in the story. And remember, for the map assessment, the questions might look like, how does this text structure contribute to, and that would be a meaning piece. Details in lines blank through blank most strongly suggest what? How do lines blank through blank contribute to the theme? And which of these following inferences can be drawn from these two quotes? So, as you're reading, remember all of the signposts that we have been looking at over the last few days. And these anchor charts should be available to you, and if not, then rewatch the videos and you will see these anchor charts for your own place. So happy reading until next time. I hope you guys have a fantastic, good, okay. I don't know where to start. I just got off because like I was only halfway in the screen and I was like, oh, I didn't know if you were going back to.
Yeah, I will.
Okay.
So I'm going to take a slate and you just start where you're signing off and I'll come back to you on camera.
Okay, hang on. I don't remember what that sounded like. Okay, I think I'm ready. All right, guys, I hope that you have a great afternoon and you have enjoyed these signposts. The next time we get together, we will look at doing a quick review and you will have a short assessment, not a test, just a short little assessment to see how you identify these signposts in the future. Happy reading for now.